Welcome to the Friday Matinee on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. I'm George Cummings.
I am T, and I'm pushing buttons today.
T's in the driver's seat. It's all good. Heard a little bit of the intro to B.B. King's The Thrill Is Gone. Of course, 89. He left us the mortal world yesterday anyway, and his legacy will live on. And why are we starting off with B.B. King, aside from the fact that we're paying tribute to the man who influenced so many people? But one of our guests, actually our first guest, Stephen K. Peeples, has spent 40 years in the industry of journalism, and also with an emphasis in certain times of rock and or roll, as it were. And you have a couple B.B. King stories to start off with.
Well, actually...
Thank you, B.B. King. That's B.B. clapping from above.
Thank you. B.B. has joined the international extraterrestrial jazz band up there.
Part of the rock and roll heaven.
They're tuning up. Well, I had the great fortune in 1987 of being invited to a taping called B.B. King and Friends. It was at the Ebony Theater, a little tiny theater, about 75 people in Los Angeles. And B.B. King was the godfather on the bill, but also on the bill were Stevie Ray Vaughan, Etta James, Chaka Khan, Paul Butterfield from the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, and several other people. But it was really a moment. But B.B. was Eric Clapton, by the way.
Oh my gosh.
But B.B. was he was the godfather at the event. Everybody was just Mr. King. They were all just very respectful of him, even at that point. And that's 87. So fast forwarding to today, he's the musical ambassador for the blues from America to the world. And I think his legacy, his music, will continue to do that for many, many years.
And what a wonderful opportunity to be in that audience where you were just surrounded by greatness.
Well, we were the 90 or so people that were in the audience were constantly like elbowing each other. Can you believe this? Look at that. Look at Etta James.
And in a little 75-person club, not that fit 90 people somehow, but not like a venue, not like a 5,000, 6,000 square feet.
It was like being in someone's living room, a really nice living room.
Quite intimate. And Ken Ehrlich was the producer. He's the guy who does all the Grammy stuff. So, and he cut his teeth on Soundstage in Chicago back in the late 60s and early 70s. So he's really the guy that wrote the book on this kind of musical presentation on TV. And so I recommend, it's on YouTube. You can see this. It's called B.B. King and Friends. And if you go to YouTube and search that, you'll find it. It's a really, really great show, and really will tune in the kids to what B.B. King was all about.
And that's interesting when you look, because he actually got his career, started in the late 40s, but by the early 50s, known as B.B. King, Blues Boy, and his original title was, I had it this morning, it'll come to me. I want to say Bayou something, but it'll get there. It was his DJ name, and he shortened it to BB.
Right.
And, had a career, still played the blues, but when you talk about the kind of the rebirth of rock and roll in the 1960s, especially with the British invasion, he was one of the main leading influences for people like Eric Clapton and Keith Richards.
And Clapton and Richards and those guys were the people that turned the rest of us on to B.B. King, because B.B. up until that point was a star on the Chitlin circuit, but wasn't known outside of that. And so the interest that Eric and Keith and the other British blues guitarists showed in him helped to bring him into the mainstream. And The Thrill Is Gone in '68 was his breakthrough hit.
Number 15, the Billboard Hot 100.
And that did it.
And I played it this morning as kind of a tribute to B.B. King, and just listening to, aside from his playing and his singing, just the overall production of it was just amazing, and it was really moving to, you hear it and you think, yeah, that's nice, but when you really get into it, especially in the context of his recent passing, it's pretty amazing, and just how music and blues and rock and roll and stuff can move us, and which has moved you into a career for the past 40 years.
Well, it's been quite a ride. Obviously, not obviously, but I was really fortunate in that both my parents were into music. My dad was a jazz beau, listening to Glenn Miller and all of the great swing bands, Benny Goodman, the Dorsey Brothers. So I was kind of weaned on that kind of stuff growing up in the 50s, and then I saw Elvis, I saw Jerry Lee, and I saw Ricky Nelson on the Ozzie and Harriet show. And I was that was it. I knew what I wanted to do.
And whose bassist? Who was his bassist?
Bill Black.
Yes, and his guitarist was James Burton.
James Burton.
Who later played with Elvis Presley.
I
Right.
didn't even know my relatives' names. I love that you guys can peel these like right off of your forehead.
And this is the thing, talking about, and we're getting to the next segment leading into the career, and I think you have your career, because you started out not necessarily as a rock and roll journalist and a journalist overall, and you do done a lot of stuff here in the Santa Clarita Valley, but to follow Stephen on Facebook is like a total like historic legacy there of all the people you've taken pictures with, you with incredibly long hair, and just a really
It was always very clean, George.
Yes, your stories are very fascinating as well, and some of the people you have met, including someone I'll talk about in the second break, is I still maintain that she broke up the Beatles, but. Well, we'll discuss that as well. Our guest, of course, Stephen K. Peeples, who is a legendary journalist here, even in Santa Clarita Valley, and still maintains a lot of a wide presence, including People's Place and also the Entertainment Report that we do in the SCV News and more. But this is the Friday Matinee on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS.
Welcome back to your Friday Matinee here on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS-AM.
One more, please. There we go. I just mouthed it.
I keep waiting
This is
for that
this is
one.
Pantomime Radio. It's brought to you by the Marcel Foundation.
You guys did so great on
Only
that.
because I'm pushing the buttons today and not George.
Our guest, our first guest, is Stephen K. Peeples, features writer and photographer for KHTS Radio News and its website for SCV and for scvnews.com. We sometimes see each other at SCV News.
Well, I've actually retired now. I'm actually just doing the SCV Entertainment Report.
That's true. Oh, that's right, you do. And it's like, I like, because I'll do the whole thing. Our Stephen K. Peeples with our entertainment report. Take it away, Stephen. Thanks, Stephen. And then, then they cut you in later. Actually throwing it back to you.
And
There he is.
I go, thanks, George.
That's right. But now, you've got a CNPA award-winning online editor, social media manager for another place here in town. They don't want to mention their name. But you also, media relations executive for Capitol Records, Electra Asylum, Rhino Entertainment, sandwiched in, radio writer-producer, Westwood One, Radio Network, Grammy-nominated record producer. So you are
An all-around
incredibly
good
rich.
guy.
Then is that right?
Well, I'd love to say yes, but it's a funny story. My mother-in-law sees these pictures of me and all of these famous people, and she says, "They're all rich and famous. How come you're not rich and famous?"
Oh.
And
It doesn't just rub off.
So I just, I took a deep breath and I said, "Mom, I'm really rich in experience.
That's it.
I've had a lifetime of wealthy experiences, and I have no regrets."
And no paparazzi outside your door like everyone that you've ever had a photo with probably has.
True. If anybody's the paparazzi, that would be me.
You have peace and privacy.
This is kind of weird, though, I got to say, to have the mode flipped on me, because I'm usually the guy asking the questions.
You're the flipper, not the flippy.
Yeah, correct. So let's go on with the flippy stuff.
But I want to talk about this because, Grant, you produced the Monterey International Pop Festival box set for Rhino back in the early 90s. Now, was that like a remix, or did you just kind of put it together for CD? Or tell me?
Yeah, we put it together for CD release. The original festival, the Monterey International Pop Festival in 1967, was the first big rock festival. There were a couple that preceded that. There was one in Big Sur and a couple of others, but the Monterey Pop Festival was the one. It was
Put on by John McKenzie of the Mamas and Papas.
Well, it was originally hatched by a guy named Alan Pariser and a couple of his partners, and he took it to Lou Adler and to John Phillips, and they basically co-opted the festival. So it was
Lou Adler, major record producer for that era.
right. He was Carole King's producer, Spirit's producer, and the Mamas and Papas producer. Hence the connection with John and Michelle Phillips. So the three of them basically co-opted the setting up of the festival. But years went by, and none of the music was ever released because it was a charity thing, and the artists did not sign off for record release. So all of this material languished in the can for years and years and years, and finally Adler went to Rhino which had developed an expertise in licensing unlicensable stuff. And Rhino attacked the project and wound up licensing the vast majority of the music that had been performed at Monterey. So I raised my hand. I was a staff guy at Rhino at the time. Raised my hand. Would love to get involved with that. The art director Jeff Gans at Rhino and I co-produced the box. And the way that we got the gig was the A&R guy gave us all of the tapes, probably 20 cassettes of all of the music at the festival, and said, come up with a 4 CD box set. Come up with a track list for 4 CDs. So Jeff and I went away independently and did that, came back with our lists. There were like 2 or 3 song variations in the entire list.
Nice.
So the A&R guy, Gary Stewart, told Jeff and I to go away and make the project. So Jeff worked on the design and designed the package, which was like a big 12 by 12 yellow pillow, the original release, and I wrote the book, which is a 12 by 12 really gorgeous full color graphic thing with photos by Henry Diltz and Jill Gibson, and that was nominated for a Grammy. The package was nominated for a Grammy in the Best Historical Album category, which was awesome. Jeff and I got to go to New York. The Grammys were there at Radio City Music Hall that year.
Nice.
And so we lost to a Billie Holiday box set, but that's okay.
Yeah, if you're going to lose to someone.
It was the only rock title in the category that time. So that was a great project.
You didn't lose out to like, Soul Asylum or someone like that, some 1992 band.
Yeah.
The Gin Blossoms.
Vanilla Ice.
Yeah. I would have gone and just kind of slit my throat or
Committed
something.
Harry Carey.
But so many stories of mentioning names like Henry Diltz, who was a major rock photographer, still is around, but he took a lot of those iconic photos from the 60s and 70s and on. So it's really amazing that, and you got to meet all these people.
Well, and I had a chance to work with Henry on his latest book. It's called Unpainted Faces, a collection of all of his classic black and white photos of Crosby, Stills and Nash and James Taylor and Linda Ronstadt and the Monkees and Mama Cass and all of these
Laurel Canyon vibe.
The whole
I'm
Laurel
seeing
Canyon
my life
scene.
flash before my eyes as you list the names.
But one more when we were in New York, we got to see Les Paul because he was playing at Fat Tuesdays, and the Grammys happened to be on a Monday night, so we went over to see Les at Fat Tuesdays, and that was a great fun too.
I met him that year too. He was still very, very active back then. I have a picture. I got lucky enough to take a picture with him. And we got to take a break. This is the Friday Matinee on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Welcome back to the Friday Matinee on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. I'm George Cummings, acting like a baseball.
No, you're like the guy in the airport giving me signs. Right. Yes, that's George Cummings.
Emergency exits.
I'm T. And we're here with Stephen K. Peeples on
Stephen
the
K.
Friday
Peeples,
Matinee.
legendary man about town.
Oh, stop.
Has met pretty much
checks in the mail.
Anybody and everybody in the rock and roll industry, having worked in journalism and especially with an emphasis for the majority of your career in kind of the rock and roll industry. I was joking around and I mentioned about the person who broke up the Beatles, that Yoko Ono, of course, she didn't break up the Beatles. She might have broken up John's marriage, but she didn't break up the Beatles. But it's very interesting connection that you have with Madame Lennon.
Well, I was working at Westwood One as a producer in the late 80s, and Yoko decided to release the John Lennon in New York City concert, which was John's last concert. It was the one-to-one benefit concerts from 1972, and they'd never been released before. She decided to release them, and Westwood One, where I was working, did a simulcast with Showtime for the premiere of it, and that involved me writing a 15-minute pre-show that led up to about John Lennon, that led up to Westwood One's simulcast. And that 15-minute pre-show involved me interviewing Yoko on the phone. So that worked out really well. The pre-show worked out really well. She loved it. A year later, Norm Pattis, the head of Westwood One, and Yoko cut a deal for all of John's audio archives to be produced in a radio program. And I got wind of this as a staff producer at Westwood One and raised my hand. I said, I'm your guy.
90% of success is showing up at the door.
I used to work at Capitol. I was the Beatlemaniac there. I worked on a Capitol project called Beatles Rarities that has gone gold, by the way.
Really?
And and I talked with Yoko last year, and she liked it, and yada, yada, yada. So long story short, she signed off on me being the writer-producer of the Lost Lennon tapes. And that went on the air in February of '88.
Awesome.
And I wrote the first 128 hour-long programs.
Wow.
And that aired through June 1990, after which I left and another person took over, and we won't talk about that.
No,
but,
we won't.
No.
But did you ever meet her in person? Or?
Yes, I did, actually. I was in New York on other business and just thought, well, what the heck? Let me see if I can contact. She happened to be in town. She picked up the phone. She said, yeah, come on over. So I actually spent like a 3 or 4 hour
At the Dakota?
block of time at the Dakota. I got pictures to prove it. They're on my Facebook page.
Just absorb the aura here.
Oh,
That's pretty
please.
amazing.
Now,
But it was really cool because she gave me a tour of the apartment. She took a picture of me sitting at John's white piano.
Ooh.
And I have to say, in her defense, she gets a lot of flack. But in the 2.5 years that I worked on the Lennon Tapes project, at no time did she ever dictate what I should or should not put in the series. And I asked her when I saw her, I said, have you ever heard the series? She says, no, it's a little too close for me. I can't. But people that I know keep telling me all the time that it's great, and they love it. So whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
That's outstanding.
Now, you've had an amazing life, and I have to ask you, every day is better than the day before. What do you do today?
Well, today I'm going to Capitol Studios. I have a meeting at 3 o'clock with Rupert Perry, who was the VP of the A&R at Capitol back in the day when I worked there in the late 70s and early 80s. And we're developing a little tribute party at Capitol's Studio A in June for John Palladino, who was a former Friendly Valley resident, actually, but a very famous, should be more famous, Capitol engineer who was engineering projects from all the way from Frank Sinatra to the band to Quicksilver Messenger Service to Juice Newton to Bud Shank to Stan Kenton, classical, jazz, you name it. And he was a Friendly Valley resident, and got to work with him when I worked there at Capitol. And I hung out a lot in the studios, I was on the 9th floor in the press department. The studios were on the bottom floor. And instead of going home, I would spend an hour or so before I left hanging out in the studios. So
George and I are going to rub elbows with you just to say we did before you leave today. For good luck.
Speaking of studios, though, you still produce and our in-house blend, which features local artists here on SCV TV.
Well, about 5 years ago, Leon and Megan at SCV TV approached me about hosting a local music show, and I thought that was a great idea because there's a lot of great music, a lot of great musicians up here that are trying to make it, and we focused on original artists, not cover bands or tribute bands. And we have 5 seasons in the can. You can see all of them at scvhouseblend.com. They're all archived there. And we had some pretty cool people on, including Chris Hillman and Herb Peterson.
Chris Hillman of the Byrds.
Of the Byrds, and Herb Peterson of major repute, both members of the Desert Rose Band and many others. So I invite people to check out Houseblend, and we'll see about season 6. We'll see what's happening in the fall.
And of course, you have your own website with a lot of this good stuff out here, StephenKPeeples.com, 2 E's.
That's right, and a PH, not a V.
Right. Outstanding. Stephen, a pleasure. We'll have to have you come back at some point, maybe when we finally move to Old Town Newhall and continue on, because these are fascinating stories.
Instead of the Friday matinee, we'll do Friday rock party and just have pajamas and stay all night.
Just to keep going.
I'm down with that.
Well, we really appreciate you stopping by, Stephen.
Well, it's been a lot of fun to be on the other side of the mic.
Well, here we go. All right. This is the Friday Matinee on your hometown station, AM 1220, KHTS.
Welcome back to the Friday Matinee here on your hometown station, AM 1220, KHTS-AM T.
I'm George.
And we are here with Stephen K. Peeples.
Encore.
That's right. Back by popular demand.
Reporter, writer, editor, producer. I mean, your history is long and varied, and your days, even today, is really amazing because in a few hours you're going to the legendary Capitol building to just do stuff, to do what you do. It's just a part of your walk, and I love that it's not anything other than, oh, this is where I've been, this is where I'm going, this is what I do. It's just a part of your fabric.
Well, and that gets me in trouble sometimes because I said in the earlier segment, it's kind of weird to be on the other side of the mic, but when people ask me about what you do and what you've done, and I tell people, sometimes it sounds like, or it's perceived to be bragging or arrogance.
But it doesn't come across like that, Stephen, because it's just what you do.
It's just that's how I take it. It's just what I do. I don't mean to be that way. I don't mean to humbly brag, which is something that's pretty common in social media, and I'm guilty of that upon occasion.
There's an enthusiasm. I don't think of it as bragging, because when I hear you tell your stories or I see it on Facebook, I think to myself, this is a man who loves what he does. He loves the people he's approaching, and you have that enthusiasm for everyone, because I've seen your interviews with people who are artists around town, and you treat them with the same excitement and the same interest that you do someone who's been a veteran of 50 years in the industry.
Well, thank you, and that's by design, particularly when I'm working with house blend artists who are in the main young, not necessarily widely known, and then some of the older artists, some of the older musicians who are playing around town. I want to give them the same amount of respect and time and storytelling time that anybody else would, and their stories are just as interesting as the real famous people's stories.
And if you don't know, House Blend is with Stephen K. Peeples. This is a half-hour weekly live music and interview program that's on SCV TV. If you'd like to find those artists,
right? It's on. It airs on Saturday nights at 10, and this weekend it's Chuck Strong and SRBQ.
I met him at the Celebrity Waiter dinner, and I have his CD, and I was actually going to talk to him about coming in, so that'd be a good opportunity. Once he's on the air, get him there.
And he's got a great story.
Outstanding.
He's got a great story. So he's going to be on House Blend this Saturday night.
As a matter of fact, his name badge was there because he was our server at that table. And before he got there, I actually took the name out and I wrote Chuck Strong and then underneath like Ox and then put it back in there. I don't know if you ever noticed that.
Chuck, so you're the
Chuck,
guy who did that.
Yes, I'm the guy.
I heard all about that, yeah.
But,
George the Joker.
But, we talk about this and I always say that our arts community is like the best kept secret in town here. But when you talk about focusing on people who do original music, really important because they seem to get lost in the mix, and especially they're very, very popular concerts in the park, but they're mostly focused on tribute bands and things like that. But we don't really get the chance for artists. There's not really any venues here in town for them to kind of promote their craft, at least here in the Santa Clarita Valley.
And that's a real pain. That's a real problem. And that's one of the reasons why House Blend exists, is to provide an avenue that doesn't exist otherwise. There's a lot of expectation up here among venues that artists are going to play for nothing. And artists are so hungry and so interested in playing in front of people that they'll do it for nothing. So it's a lose-lose situation, except for the listeners and the fans who get to hear free music. But they should always contribute. Throw something in the hat, buy the cover, buy the minimum.
And they deserve it.
Tip your waitress.
They work hard for it. It's not like they are someone who's just bringing, your coffee to you in a paper cup. These people are practicing. They're preparing. They are absolutely professionals, and they deserve that.
Well, they're putting their heart and soul into what they do. And anybody who does that deserves some props, regardless of what it is. Because they do have the passion for life, the passion for what they're doing, and they're not just doing a walkthrough. There's a very famous Elvis quote in an interview that he did shortly after returning from the Army. He says, you only get one shot at this life. You don't come back for an encore.
That's true.
And that's totally true. So, the older I get, the more I value every moment.
Right, and that's why you're a busy man getting things done, but really important things and interesting.
Well, I'm the busiest semi-retired guy you know. I keep trying to retire, but the phone keeps ringing.
Now, when you were in places like Capitol and the other Westwood One, you had your ear to the ground because you were in the halls and you heard stuff and you were plugged in. How do you find that translates now that you're not in that kind of environment? Are you out? I'm just always curious how someone seeks out that next project, that next thing they hear about, or are you at a place where people are dialing you up and saying, "Hey, this is happening"?
Well, I'm at the point now where I'm turning down projects, which
that's a good thing.
5 years ago, I wouldn't have done that.
You're hungrier.
Well,
and they were fun.
The independent, the motif is just say yes to everything and then figure out how to do it.
Indeed.
And that's been my MO for years and years and years.
If they ask you if you can, just nod your head, say yes.
Yeah, I had never produced a radio program when I interviewed at Westwood One to produce radio. But I'd been in recording studios. I was a writer. I had enough knowledge of the environment and the context, and it was no big deal.
So
I just
learn a little bit of the hardware.
stepped across the street, and boom, I'm a radio producer.
Familiarize yourself with the nomenclature, and you're off and running. Speaking of which, we have a couple seconds left. Let's talk a little bit really quickly because I want to lean into the fact that, and coming back from the break, that not only are you a rock and roll writer, but you are also a musician yourself. So we're going to talk about that and kind of talk about your background, and we will now take a break. This is Friday Matinee on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Here's the Paul McCartney move. Yeah, there we go. It's the Friday Matinee on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. A little bit of a Beatles vibe for the man who, actually, we have Coffee with the Beatles, which is kind of varying times between 9 and noon. I think it's on between 9 and 10 now, or 11 and 12. I don't exactly remember because we have a few shows in that it's as I say, robo-hosted by yours truly. Every now and then I sneak in to do a live version. But prior to that, we had a Beatles show here. I want to say Beatles, etc. Am I right? Stephen K. Peeples, and you were the host.
That's correct. That was summer 2004 program. It went for 13 weeks. Mike Dowler was my engineer, and my associate producer was my son Scott, who was about 13 or 14 at the time. And we had sponsorship for the first 13 weeks, but we couldn't get sponsorship to renew it, so it remained a summer series. But
there we go.
Near and dear to our hearts.
Oh, I know Jason Endicott and I a couple of years back had the argument of which one was instigated by our station manager Kyle Jellings, by the way. Which one of us knew more about the Beatles?
And my 18-year-old who has autism and studies the Beatles wants to come in and have a piece of that action.
I was going to say though that we actually did play Beatles Trivial Pursuit during a broadcast of Coffee with the Beatles, and we came to a draw. So I think we need to have Stephen K.
and my son
and
Jojo.
In to see how the kind of the four-person free-for-all could happen.
And the different age groups, I think, is kind of fascinating.
But I was thinking about this, and I don't know if I was thinking in conjunction with you being on the program or just in general, because there's so much Beatles trivia, especially when you become such a fan. As a matter of fact, I joke around and pretend I'm not a fan. Like people will post Beatles like young kids, and I'll say that's my favorite Herman's Hermit song. It's not Herman's Hermit, and they take me seriously,
George the Joker.
That's me. But there's so much great Beatle trivia. Do you have a favorite Beatle trivia story? Thinking of, for example, John Lennon laying down on his back, just singing Revolution.
I was just going to throw that out. Yeah, that is a great piece of trivia. He was trying to get a certain vocal effect, and there was a lot of experimentation going on during the recording of Revolver.
In so many ways.
In '66, and so one of the experiments to get a certain vocal tone involved Lennon lying on his floor, lying on the studio floor in Studio 2 at Abbey Road, and singing from that standpoint. And it gave him a more guttural kind of sound that he would not get if he were standing up. Another great piece of trivia on that is on that song while we're on Revolution is that they recorded it without a solo in the middle, and they were thinking about a guitar, but then they decided, well, let's get Nicky Hopkins in here. So
He's a keyboardist.
Keyboard player. So they brought Nicky Hopkins in, and Nicky, in one take, did the solo for the fast version of Revolution.
Really?
Oh,
Yes.
I did not know that.
And I have actually one of the rough mixes that was in the Lost Lennon Tapes archives is Revolution with no solo on it, which is really cool. And then I had a chance to talk with Nicky Hopkins. He came in to do an interview for the Lost Lennon Tapes, and we talked about that session and all of the Imagine stuff that he did. And again, another great interview, another great time, lots of great trivia. I should mention, if you want to mention Beatles trivia, the best place to find out the real story about the Beatles is in Mark Lewison's book. It's called Tune In. It's the first volume in a 3-volume biography that he's writing. The first volume was released about a year and a half ago. And the second volume, and it goes from the 1800s, tracing the lineage of the band members,
Wow.
up to 1962, to December 31st, 1962,
Wow.
which was the beginning of, the next day on January 1st, or, it really started, 63 was the breakout year. But
Right.
up till 62, at the end of 62, they hired Ringo and recorded their first single, Love Me Do. And that was like in the top 20 or something, but that got him off. And
And speaking of favorite Beatles trivia, the fact that Ringo, they hired him, but yet he did not play drums on the single version of Love Me Do. That was drummer Andy White.
yes, that was as a hedge.
Right.
Producer George Martin thought it might be a good idea to have just as a backup, just to have another drummer around. And I forget this, but one of them appeared on the album.
I think
and
Ringo was on the album, and I think Andy White was the one of the singles.
on the single version. Yeah, I think you're right.
But that's funny because that's like one of the easiest drum beats
It
ever.
is.
I could play that, and I'm terrible with my independent studies.
But was it really about the drumming or who was cuter?
I think it depends on your point of view.
I'm a girl, and
okay.
from a marketing place.
And from you?
I would want to know who was cuter, not who had the better drumming
Who
skills.
do you think?
Ringo was one of the best drummers ever in history of all drummers, but he's a cutie pie. He's different. I'm just curious if that was one of the considerations to.
I don't think Alan was that photogenic. I think he was more of a behind the scenes kind of guy as opposed to
I
a
think
guy.
they went with a guy who looked better in the suit and tie.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I got to give it to Ringo. I listened to hours and hours and hours and hours of Beatle outtakes, and there would be breakdowns that would happen because one of them would screw up a lyric or blow a guitar lick or something. But Ringo
Never.
was not the perpetrator of the screw ups.
One of the
I mean,
best
almost
drummers
every take that I heard he was fine. It was the other guys that screwed up.
Well, that would link to why he was so offended when Paul played drums, re-recorded the drum track on back in the USSR. I can imagine it caused him to break up for a little while. There.
Well, yeah, there was the White Album
Ringo
was
to leave, I should say.
a little contentious, but they made it right.
They did.
They made up. Kiston made up and
good.
got him back into the studio, and they finished the White Album.
That's right. This has been Beatles Trivia Hour with your hosts. Actually, our guest, Stephen K. Peeples, who has a litany, a legacy of people that he's met, or people he's worked with, and a lot of rock and roll and general journalism experience and knowledge. We will talk with Stephen in our final segment coming back after this, the Friday Matinee on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Welcome back to the Friday Matinee on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. I'm George Cummings.
I am T.
You're in the driver's seat. You're doing pretty good.
You
the hang of it.
It's the buttons I can push buttons in real life, but back here.
The nomenclature is just getting there. Our guest, Stephen K. Peeples. 40 years in the industry, or almost, about to celebrate what's going to be an anniversary of 40 years. But let's talk about this because you grew up in Florida. all-American kind of a place to live, and parents were also journalists. Is that right?
Yeah, both folks were hard news journalists. They worked at the Miami News. My dad was an editor. My mom was a proofreader. And
So you didn't get away with anything, did you?
well, no, actually, it was great because on weekends when I was in junior high school and too young to be left alone, but too old to have a babysitter, they'd take me to work with them on weekends. And so I was adopted by the composing room crew, and Dad taught me how to edit, and Mom taught me how to proofread. And I actually had, there were actually stories in the Miami News that I edited when I was in junior high school, sitting with my dad.
And so how did you officially get into the business?
Well, that's another goofy story because, like most teenagers, when I got into my mid-teens, I wanted to do anything other than what my parents were doing.
Of course.
Not understanding that by osmosis I had this incredible background in English and language and music and creative arts. My mom was a piano player and an artist, so I finally got wise, though. I finally thought that, wait a minute, I've got something valuable here. It was kind of a weird thing. I was going to school, and our house got broken into. So we called a locksmith. The locksmith came over to change the locks on the front door because my dad thought that somebody had stolen a key or something. So the locksmith is taking the lock apart, and I'm watching him work, and all these little pieces and so forth. And I thought it was fascinating. And he's like, "You're really interested in this, aren't you?" I said, "Well, yeah, it's pretty cool." He says, "Well, we have an apprentice job open. Would you like to come down and apply for it?" I said, "Sure." So this was in West Hollywood, this lock shop. So I got a job. I was a locksmith for about 8 months, 9 months, and I got a job ticket. I went to Lookout Management. This is in 1974, 9120 Sunset. And as soon as I walked in the door, I heard a new Joni Mitchell album, Court and Spark, that had not been released yet. But the staff was playing it in-house to figure out, well, what are we going to choose for a single and that kind of stuff. So I took about 5 times longer to do the job than I needed to. And when I got out of there, I said, okay, I got to be in there. Those people look like me. That's my music. I got to be doing that somehow. So I'm thinking, how the heck am I going to do that? A few months later, I got another job to go to Cashbox magazine.
Oh my gosh.
Which was one of the 3 music trade magazines at the time. It was Cashbox, Billboard, and Record World. And so I went to Cashbox and big double doors on 6565 Sunset, 5th floor, 6th floor, or whatever, big double doors office. I opened the doors, and the cacophony was unbelievable. Young people, typewriters, music, Rolodex machines, that were sending faxes, this is 1975 now, to the East Coast office, and it would take like 10 minutes to transmit a page.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, so I said, I got to do this. And it didn't take a brain, so they had me change the locks on the front door. So I hand the bill, do the job, hand the bill to the office manager and said, I understand you have an opening for a writer. I'd like to apply for the position. He looked at me like I was crazy. My hair was long, but it was clean. And he said, how did you know? I said, well, it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out you're changing the locks in the front door. You must have just canned somebody.
Wow.
So he says, well, actually, that's true. And so he set up an interview with the editor, David Budge. And I walked out of there with, Mel, the office manager, said, when you come to talk to David, bring your published work to show him. And so I said, yeah, sure, no problem. And I walked out of there and I said, oh, crap. I'm
Don't have any.
I'm a foot off the ground, but I have no published work. Fortunately, I had been writing letters back and forth with my friends in Florida. And if I bought an album, hey, I just got the new Buffalo Springfield album. Check out this. Jim Messina is doing that, and blah, 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 and this, that.
And give a little review?
Reviewing the album, basically. And so I found a bunch of these handwritten letters, and I took them in with me to this interview, which was going to last 15 minutes, and it went on for 2 hours.
Wow.
And they offered me the job. The only thing was it paid after taxes and stuff, it paid $110 a week.
People think that these are like lofty positions.
No.
Instantly
And
rich,
I was
but yeah,
making $500 a week as a locksmith.
in 1970 or 70s dollars.
Yeah. So I went to my dad. I said, Pop, I got this incredible opportunity. Can I move back in with you because I can't afford to? And he said, okay, I'll give you a year. Okay, so that was the beginning of it. But my very first interview
Fame, glory,
was
and
with
top ramen.
Waylon Jennings.
Oh,
My very first interview, the very first feature that I wrote, and the very first feature that was published in Cashbox was about Waylon Jennings. And this is July 12th, 1975. So I figure July 12th, 2015, 40 years. I recently posted that piece, which was out of print, God knows where, but I have a copy of it, so I reposted it on my website, and there it is.
And that's StephenKPeeples.com, PH, and then Peoples with 2 E's.
That's it.
And there it
Great
is.
story.
Amazing. But yeah, just like I said, following you on Facebook and seeing your stuff and the things you post and also your musings and everything else are very, very amazing. And I like that you feel like at this point, I'm old enough now where I'm just going to go ahead and tell it like it is. And you do. And I really appreciate that about you. This has been a lot of fun. I mean, we could chit chat about rock and roll.
telling you, pajama party.
All day long. But alas, it's good that we've gotten to actually have you for the whole hour because it's really cool to be able to get a whole bunch of other stories in. So again, StephenKPeeples.com. Also check out houseblend.com.
It's scvhouseblend.com.
scvhouseblend.com, of course. And there's also SCV TV Saturday nights at 10 o'clock. Channel 20 if you're a Time Warner subscriber, and 99 if you're a Uverse subscriber.
And it streams live at scvtv.com.
Anytime you want. This has been the Friday Matinee on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Stick around for Life Leadership with Alex Urbina.